Hi, welcome back to Space Thoughts. It's been an exciting week. Yesterday culminated with the launch of Demonstration Mission 2 with the Dragon crewed capsule, and as of this video, the capsule has docked with the International Space Station. So, truly a milestone, exciting times for outer space, and I don't often use the term excited often, but this is definitely a time when excited is the proper adjective for what's been happening. One of the things I wanted to talk about was safety versus risk. And these are kind of like two competing paradigms, in my opinion, on how we view outer space activities. And it's something that, I've talked about in blogs and had some arguments with people about. In fact, I had a rather spirited debate with a former FAA administrator a few years back ago at an event in Washington, D.C. about, the paradigm of, are we talking about safety in space industry, or are we talking about mitigating risks? So the idea is right now, we have a very safety-minded culture, and with all the lawyers around, it's, no doubt, no wonder why we have all these mindset about making things safe. We are definitely a litigious society, and that definitely affects the mindset of how we view activities. But when it comes to spaceflight, I mean, safety has become so paramount. It's almost become it's almost been encultured in our space activities, and it becomes a political hot potato sometimes, especially, in congressional hearings. Well, is this safe? Are the astronauts going to be safe? Are the spaceflight participants going to be safe? And in particular with commercial crew, that's been a really big issue, and NASA's been very tough on both Boeing and SpaceX in making sure their spacecraft meet their safety requirements. Now, they use the term safety, but what they really mean is making sure they're minimizing the risks. And I think there's a general understanding that when you're sitting on top of basically what is a controlled explosion on a launch pad and going into a near vacuum in outer space with basically this bubble of atmosphere transporting your crew around, you're going to want to make sure that everything works to the best of its abilities, because there's a lot of dangers out there and there's a lot of risk. So I think, safety has been conflated with what's really, in my opinion, risk, mitigating risk and risk management. And I think that in a sense that's basically held us back a lot. That's always made us a little bit afraid to do things. And let's face it, safety is a huge issue. We all want to feel safe. We want to feel safe in our cars or when we go outside, but the true fact of the matter is, once we step out the door, we're always taking on new risk, but we're just deciding we're going to, accept those risks. And I was kind of interested to see that, this NASA actually talked about this, and the astronauts who have basically commanded DM2 at this point have taken on that mindset as well. And I'm just going to look at this little article here from Space News, and the title is pretty catchy, and this is by Jeff Faust. From Space News, and it basically says commercial crew astronauts accept risk of test flight. And I think that boils it right down to that, the essence of what this is about. This is about accepting risk, not so much safety. There's some great notable quotes here that I'm going to go in and highlight. We're going to try and highlight. And basically, but I think that the overall assumption is that there is, basically, when they look at the risks that are involved, when NASA is basically evaluating these spacecraft and evaluating whether or not they're ready for a mission before they certify them, they understand there's going to be a lot of risk, but the idea is how many of these risks can be mitigated, and how can you lessen the probability that an accident is going to happen, or one of these risks is going to manifest itself in a bad way. And the whole idea is, by making it safe, where basically, NASA, SpaceX, and Boeing are basically addressing those risks and mitigating them. And it sounds like we have somebody else has a risk as a fire truck is going by right now. But bottom line is, I just think this whole idea of making things safe is, counterproductive, just because it gets us in the mindset that, in space activities like this, nothing's going to happen. If a capsule is certified, this is going to be routine. There's not going to be anything bad's going to happen. And I think we found that out the hard way during the Apollo program, that just isn't so. You look at Apollo 1. Apollo 1 was very it was a bad thing. There was a design flaws, and it basically led to the death of 3 astronauts. Apollo 13, we almost lost a crew on that one because of a manufacturing defect in an oxygen tank. And that almost, but fortunately the crew got back. But there was an unforeseen risk that manifested itself and almost caused an incident. But even though, the moon flight seemed pretty routine, even like Apollo 11, there was a lot of risk there. And I remember some people who were working on the Apollo program, they were basically like, white knuckled a lot of times during those flights because we had crews flying out to the moon and back, and anything, but even though they thought they covered every contingency, they always knew that something could happen. There was always risk in those missions. And I think that's, the paradigm we have to keep with space activities, as that really they're never going to be truly safe. They're always going to entail some sort of risk, but there is a point where we can accept risk. And I think when you get and talk about commercial space in itself, and as far as space flight participants, in other words, ordinary, regular citizens taking tourism flights in outer space, there's basically requirements in federal law that what we call a hold harmless agreement is signed by which is basically a waiver. The space flight participants say, we're not going to sue if I'm injured or die during one of these flights because of the inherent risk of the activity. In other words, no matter how safe these commercial spacecraft are made, there's always going to be a risk. There's going to be an incident just because of the nature of space flight. And I think from the point of when we get into the areas like space resource harvesting, when we actually send crews to other celestial bodies to harvest space resources, or even settlement, which is basically a long-term goal, there's always going to be some sort of risk in that. But the question is, will we accept that risk? So basically, I want to just kind of cap this off in this idea of a paradigm with something I read in the UAE space law. Now, I talked about the space law about a month ago, and I did a video on it. I've since then done a more deeper dive into it and actually wrote a special issue of my briefing letter, the Pressy, which I put out last, I believe it was Tuesday, for my subscribers that basically did a deep dive on the law. One of the provisions that really caught my eye was what they called risk management. And basically what it does, it requires these operators of space activities to create a risk management plan. And I really thought that was interesting because it didn't talk about safety as much as it talked about mitigating risks. So I think in essence, the UAE domestic space law is superior to the U.S. law in the respect that it actually it changes the paradigm from a safety culture to that of recognizing risk is there and basically mitigating or trying to plan for that risk or preventing risk from actually creating a bad incident. So I think that's a pretty interesting paradigm shift in terms of domestic space law. And really compared to the U.S. law, I think that is an evolutionary jump ahead in terms of sophistication. So just an anecdote, just to understand risk and why it's part of our lives. When I was a 2L, I was privileged to work with a solo practitioner, a personal injury attorney, and one of the things he basically said, he also had business clients, and he basically told his business clients he would lay out all the risks of doing business and everything that could go wrong. And basically, like he said, if my clients did everything I told them, or took my advice about every aspect of risk and did something that I told them not to do, or vice versa, decided to listen to my advice and not do something, they wouldn't be able to do business because there's always some sort of risk in business. So he said, basically, they got to know where they know where the risk is, and they choose to act on it despite the risk, and at least make contingency plans for that risk. And I guess another analogy is with what happened with Crew Dragon. Elon Musk basically spent 18 years, spent a lot of money, a lot of it of his own, investing in rockets, and that was a huge risk. It was a huge risk financially. That was a huge risk for his personal reputation as well. But yesterday, that culminated in the launch of DM2. We now have it docked to the space station, and if everything goes smoothly, and we hope it's smooth from this point out and not really exciting, that capsule will be certified for commercial crew missions. Now, that doesn't mean the risk isn't going to go away, because the risk is always going to be there, and the unexpected can always happen, especially when you're riding a controlled explosion into outer space. But it does mean that, you know, for his personal spend, all that risk that he took to get here actually paid off because he was willing to take that risk. So anyways, I'm going to drop it there. I'm going to try to do these weeklies. This June is going to be a very busy month for me with some projects that are on the boards, but I am going to try and do a weekly video. I had one subscriber who was really interested. I mentioned in my last video about definition of space debris. The subscriber was very interested in learning more about that, so I'm going to be working on a video for that. This is something I wrote about back in 2012, I believe it was. So I'll have to dust that off and make up some slides for that. Otherwise, you can email me or leave a comment about what kind of videos you'd like to see, and I'll see if I can accommodate you. Again, it's a beautiful day out there. I hope you're safe, and I hope you stay healthy, and we'll talk to you next time.